Hello, Musto0063 back here to continue on with the Mega Man 11 Roadmaster Perfect runs. With the perceived middle of the road stage now complete, in addition to all the easier ones, that leaves me with 3 rather unappealing stages left. However, going purely on perceived remaining Roadmaster difficulty, that meant the next one up was Bounce Man. I'm going to forego my usual introduction about only piping up on the screens that cause me trouble, because, well, I'd almost never not be talking. Apart from these first few screens, and the last couple or so, there's barely anything that didn't give me grief at some point in time. I'll also pre-announce that Bounce's stage is the one I was referring to way back in Tundra stage, when I was laying out the Perfect Run rules, and mentioned we're going to have to make an exception to those rules. One screen in the stage is going to require the use of a charged Mega Buster shot. So you'll note here that I turn around to climb this ladder from the right in order to face left. That means I start this screen facing left and I can attack this bouncing enemy while still on a flat surface. Very useful tip. If only the rest of the screen was that easy though. The lowest balloon enemy here is about as annoying an enemy as I've ever encountered in a Mega Man game. Somewhat unfortunately, it is possible to get by it without needing to use a charge shot. You have to kill it at an extremely precise moment such that you can make it past the balloons that get left behind. I cannot begin to tell you how unbelievably frigging irritating having to pull off that manoeuvre is. But that's not the end of the problems on this screen, oh no. You've got another irritatingly placed balloon enemy at the top right that you actually have to make appear and then duck down out of harm's way before progressing. It's so easy to bounce off the walls just a little too high and smack straight into the damn thing. And it's also quite easy to miss time sliding under it to finally get by. I hate that screen. We're talking more than 20 outtakes on just that one alone. And regrettably a few mess ups on this one too, all thanks to me missing these lyrics, which is easy to do when you're constantly bouncing and ending up getting cornered. You'll also probably get a flavour of how completely paranoid and overcautious I now am. That's just how that previous screen made me, unfortunately. And this screen didn't go flawlessly either. I found myself most of the time trying to do the same as what happened here. Climb a little way up to scroll the lyric on screen, go all the way back to the floor and take the lyric out before making another ascent. I also like to try to take out the 2 lowest wall cannons from a safe distance before progressing further, but again it's all too easy to bounce too high up the section on the right of the screen initially and get sniped by one of the wall cannon shots. And if you think this room is a gimme, no. I swear this bouncing enemy ricocheted in the most ridiculous way imaginable and managed to get me. It was mercifully on just the one occasion, but still. And that brings us to the first Balloon Frog mid-boss, and while considerably easier than the second one, it's still not without its potential difficulties. All my failures on this Balloon Frog came from the bouncing enemies ricocheting in what honestly felt like really unfair directions. They cooperated quite nicely here, but I genuinely have no idea what you're supposed to do if they choose to horribly misbehave. And I would really have liked a breather screen after the mid-boss. Unfortunately, I did not get it. Instead, I got a screen that did me in a double-digit number of times, and that shielded enemy was pretty much the cause of all my outtakes. It just seemed to repeatedly shoot at me at the worst possible times, such as whether I bounced high or low off the balls, I was bound to run into its shots one way or another. The narrow column of balls coupled with the balloon enemy and pitch rising enemy all don't help any either though. Ah, here's my breather screen. Very much appreciated. The first one of about 5 or 6 that actually didn't end a run. Nor did this one, incidentally. This one did though. Took me a little while to get the hang of shooting at the low points of my bouncing so that shots didn't deflect off the leftmost balloon. That happens too often, and the bouncing enemies will close in on you. Also worth pointing out that unlike a previous screen I flagged this up on, I can't enter this screen facing right and attack the bouncing enemies on the flat surface. That would have made the screen fairly trivial. So here is a screen that requires use of a charged buster shot. A few outtakes to mention before we get to the details of that though, mostly the result of missing the second to last jump you have to pull off and landing on the balloons at the bottom right of the screen. Ugh. Anyway, now that we've actually seen them, it is impossible to not have the balloon enemies from the leftmost enemy in your way, so you have to take them out with a charge buster shot to progress without taking damage. Here's the jump I was referring to earlier, by the way. Do your best not to accidentally collide with the balls. You'll regret it otherwise. I know I certainly did. That brings us to the second frog balloon sub-boss, and the issue with this one is, you've guessed it, the bouncy floor. Now you can no longer stand on flat ground when dealing with the bouncing enemies, and if they ricochet in a non-front-to-friendly direction, I've even less of an idea as to how you're supposed to dodge them. Looking at that, you might wonder what I'm complaining about. This was easily hands down the most cooperative those bouncing enemies were while attempting to play around this stage. It was actually such a good fight that I even killed the frog balloon on its first cycle. Not sure I'd ever done that before. Trust me though, that was horrible most of the time. Another double-digit number of outtakes suffered. Thankfully, the level should actually be mostly free and clear from here on. There isn't anything that's too tricky at all. But of course there had to be something, didn't there? So pay attention to how big the area where the spy enemy is going back and forth. You'd think if something caught you off guard and you had to make an emergency landing on that floor, then you'd have to be pretty unlucky to land on that spine enemy, right? Yes. Yes, you would. The word unlucky, however, doesn't seem to quite apply to me the same way it does to everyone else. I did have to make an emergency adjustment on one occasion and land on that huge floor, but of course my timing could not have been more perfect, and I landed smack bang on the spine enemy. Pissed off does not even come close to describing how I felt at that moment. Fortunately, it was the latest part of the level where I actually messed up though. So no outtake to speak of here, but you might notice that I wait for this balloon enemy here to make it a fair way over the right before killing it. That's because on one run, I inadvertently bounced off the side of the ball there and went fleeing back to the right. I didn't actually collide with the balloons, much to my relief, but I came mightily close. So much so that on all future attempts from that point on, including here, I ensured the balloons were further over to the right, such that if I did accidentally bounce off to the right again, there was no danger of actually hitting it. Oh, and the last interesting thing to mention is that I didn't actually get through that wall cannon section quite as I'd intended. But even with me ended up not bouncing how I had done on previous attempts, I still managed to get through okay. So, yay for that at least. And so to Bounce Man. This isn't a terrible fight, even given my difficulty in avoiding bouncing objects, but after that level, I wish he was so much easier. To be fair, for the most part, he's absolutely fine until you get him down to half health and he starts doing his speed gear move. He bounds around the room fairly slowly, so I don't have much of an issue working out his trajectory, and it's pretty easy to avoid his fists whenever he chooses to fling them at me. So, no huge problems thus far. A speed gear move though, yeah, can't deny I'm relying on a little bit of good fortune that A, he activates it in a friendly position, and B, I have time to get myself set properly. And by the way, so lucky here. Wow. Just about got away with that. And that won't be the end of the good fortune. The final time he activates his speed gear, I pull off such a ridiculously lucky dodge, I genuinely don't know how I did that in the heat of the moment. I somehow, when motioning a slide, don't end up going anywhere, and although he bounces it all around me, he never runs into me. Here we go. Insanely lucky, but of some of the nonsense that I experienced in that stage, not overdue in the slightest. Screw you and your goddamn level. I think we all need a bit of a breather after that. So, as before, though no transition to Let's Play the Perfect Run, enjoy the awesome 8-bit stage music before we get to the, I'm sure much anticipated, difficulty analysis. Good freaking God. I said quite deliberately at the end of the last video about how great it was that Acid Man went down much quicker than I was expecting. This was quite the opposite. In hindsight, I don't know why I hadn't expected this to be a nightmare stage. Anyone that has watched even a few of my I Want to Be the Guy fan game videos should know what one of my all-time most awkward things is. Yep, bouncing projectiles. Even so, I'm not sure I was anticipating how hellish this stage was going to be. I actually remember liking this stage when just playing the game casually before, but the key word there is casually. Perfect running this stage? Ugh, never again. It took me 4¼ hours to finally get this stage done. That is the longest amount of time for any stage that I have actually managed a perfect run on. Only Plug comes anywhere close to that time, and even that took 40 minutes fewer. I suffered 56 outtakes during those 400 hours, with 5 failures coming on the Robot Master. 56 is not the largest number of outtakes I've had on the stage. Strike, Turbo and Plug had more, with Plug the winner on 67, but it's the length of the stage in comparison to those other ones that resulted in this one taking the longest. So where do I even start with regard to analysing this level? Much like Strikes, it's nasty right the way through, but this one takes a good 7 or 8 minutes to get through, in comparison to around 3 to 4 for Strike. So in the interest of not going on for an eternity, I'll reserve my hostility to a few select screens that gave me the most grief. First of those is the screen where you have to kill the balloon holding enemy at just the right moment so you can sneak past the left behind balloons and not have to use an unnecessary charge shot to destroy said balloons. Absolute pain in the neck this, and it actually took me a few failed attempts where the balloon pattern gave me no chance to appreciate that I could go back off the bottom of the screen, reclimb the ladder, and reset things to give myself another go. But even that's not as straightforward as you think. Because you're constantly bouncing, it can be really awkward to actually land on or climb back down the ladder. Using my pixel alignment knowledge from I Want to Be the Guy fan games, I found that bouncing off the left-hand wall seems to give you a decent-ish alignment to pull this off, but it never quite seemed foolproof, and I'm not even sure pixel alignment is even a thing in Mega Man games, so that may have been wholly unnecessary anyway. But regardless, like I said, absolute pain in the neck to get the balloon pattern to cooperate, and if that wasn't irritating enough, there's another balloon holding enemy at the top of the screen that is super in the way, and you even have to not bounce all the way up initially, as it's always, and I do mean always, in the way if you just immediately head all the way up. You have to go high enough up to scroll it onto the screen initially, then drop down where it's out of view, and then time your bouncing reascent so that it's then out of your way. And after that, still have to pull off an easy to miss time slide under to get past. Although, in all fairness, I think you could probably shoot it at a simple time to get out of the way, but you then do have to ensure the balloons it leaves behind don't then obstruct your path. Regardless, I hate that screen. 20 plus outtakes on it, and that includes occasions where I ultimately ended up wasting time by buggering about resetting the screen to get by the first balloon holding enemy, only to then get hit to the second one. Fun, right? The second terrible screen is the one just after the first frog balloon sub-boss. Balloon holding enemies right in the way, bottomless pits with enemies that rise out of them, and one particularly annoyingly placed shield enemy that seems to shoot at literally the worst possible time imaginable. I just could not hit upon a decent strategy for dealing with that shield enemy for ages, and even now I'm still not confident that my method works as high a proportion of the time as I would like it to. Another double-digit number of outtakes here. And the third screen I wish to give a specific mention to is the second frog balloon sub-boss. The first sub-boss is okay, although I did still get hit to the blasted bouncing enemies from time to time when they ricocheted in what felt like really unfair directions. But at least you have flat ground for the first sub-boss. Not so the second, you're constantly bouncing up and down. That makes timing bouncing over the frog balloon, especially if you have to do it a second time, potentially quite awkward, but it's the bloody bouncing enemies that are the real problem. Without the flat ground to stand on and the ability to chain the hits in on these things, you seem to be at the mercy of where these things ricochet to. Again, a double-digit number of outtakes on this sodding sub-boss, mainly thanks to that aforementioned unfair reliance on the bouncing enemies not ricocheting right into me. Those 3 screens definitely seem like the worst to me, but for goodness sake don't take any of the other screens of the level lightly. The near constant bouncing you'll be doing just makes things rather unpredictable at times, and that's certainly not helpful when you're striving for perfection. Bounce Man himself thankfully isn't awful, like Plug or Turbo, GameCube Anniversary Collection version anyway, but coming off the back of that level, he's not as easy as I would like him to be. Strike Man would be the perfect comparison here. His level is the only other one, as Stage Life Perfected, that was anywhere close to being as difficult and annoying to get through. But he's a very easy Robot Master to defeat, albeit I panicked horribly and actually got hit to him once. Bounce Man, as I just said, isn't awful, but he's definitely no gimme, and of course, let's not forget my general inability to read the trajectories of bouncing objects very well. It's mainly his speed gear attack that caused me the most problems, but the rest of the fight shouldn't be underestimated. It's still all too easy for me not to predict where he'll bounce to, get cornered and have him run right into me. Mostly during the latter part of the fight, when he ricochets around more quickly than he does during the earlier part of the fight. Dodging his arm thrusts and ensuring he doesn't drop onto me don't tend to be issues, despite how close it looked like I cut things during that fight, but again, I still have to keep my wits very much about me. That speed gear attack though, yeah, that's a big problem for me. And while I shouldn't sell myself short and say that there's no skill involved, I can't deny that every time I have to dodge this attack, I'm relying on a smidge of good fortune that my starting position is decent enough to allow me to at least try to get set for it. Not something I want to have to rely on that, it rarely bodes well for me. And having to do so at the back end of this stage, ugh. So this should come as absolutely no surprise, but this was probably close to the most frustrated I'd felt during this Perfect Run series, if not the absolute most. I cannot stress enough how annoying this was to keep having to replay. So I've said before, and I did it with Strike, where I rated it as 8 out of 10, despite that level being absolutely horrible, though with an easy Robot Master, that I've been reserving scores of 9 out of 10 for completed stages where the Robot Master was hellish, so Shadow, Turbo, GameCube Anniversary Collection version, and Plug. But, again, the fairest comparison I can make here is with Strike Stage. He got 8 out of 10 with a similar number of level outtakes, but with an easier Robot Master fight, and me spending an hour and a half less time on him. So on that basis, and I think mainly owing to the time it took to finally get this done, congratulations Bounce Man, I'm giving you 9 out of 10 as well. The highest rating I'm giving to stages I can actually perfect run. The level here is just absolutely horrid, with 3 screens in particular worthy of yet another mention. The one where you have to kill the balloon-holding enemy at just the right moment to allow you to pass through without the need for an unnecessary charge shot, and still have to deal with another awkwardly placed balloon enemy further up. The one just after the first sub-boss with the bottomless pits, and one especially irritating shield enemy that always seems to shoot you at the worst possible time. And the second frog balloon sub-boss where you're constantly bouncing on the floor. In particular, it's so easy to get hit by those bouncing enemies when you can't stay on the ground and they're ricocheting all over the place. Other screens aren't as bad as those 3, but it's still very easy to mess up pretty much everywhere else too. And lastly, Bounce Man. Not the most difficult Robot Master even in this game, in my opinion, but not easy enough for my liking at the end of that level. I think 9 out of 10 here is a no-brainer, and what can I say? I massively underestimated how tough this stage was going to be. Oy. Of course, owing to my attempting perfect runs in perceived difficulty order, we've got 2 stages left, and I thought we're going to be tougher than that one. Yay! I'd say tune in the game to see whether or not my next stage finally gets me to blow a fuse, but believe me, I'd already well since done so. Hope to see you next time anyway. Cheerio.